Right, this is a wee bit of an unplanned lecture, but I was sitting down reading this book, Sport in Iceland, the other day, and I came across some really interesting data in it which related to performance analysis, or I saw the direct link to performance analysis, but data was presented in a way that we don't often hear about in when we talk about PA. So we've talked about it and how it is used mainly to assess physical performance. However, I thought I would do an addendum slide with data I picked up from the book from Vidar Haldarosen. Now, the process in which I ended up reading this book was pretty exciting. Now, around the same time as I was, oh, something's gone wrong here. Here we go. So, around the same time as I was supervising an MSc project related to learning in Scottish football, now that's not an oxymoron, I read an article in the Guardian newspaper which talked about the sporting successes of Iceland, and specifically how well the football team were doing, and how they had beaten England and so on. Now, me being me, and it's an approach that I urge you to use as well, is when I find something interesting, I, especially in the newspaper, think it's sometimes important to go to the source of the news. So what I did was I ended up emailing the Icelandic FA and chatting to their head of coach education. Now, I don't think I've got any Icelandic students out there, so no one's going to pick me up on the pronunciation. But I spoke with Dagur Dagbajarson or something like that there, and had a long conversation with Dagur. And the end result of that was that I ended up writing a piece for the conversation. Now, that's a newspaper, an online newspaper written by academics. The bosses at the university like when we write for it because it gets the university exposure. What happened next was, I didn't expect it, to be honest. I ended up being interviewed by the BBC too, and then I created, how would I describe it, a shitstorm in the media too. So delved into reasons why there was challenges in Scottish football and used lessons from Iceland there. But a key lesson I took from that storm was that, well, after doing a carefully managed piece in the Times newspaper and managing to retain a degree of editorial control there, it went a little bit wrong. Initially, I was asked to do something for the Daily Mail. You'll be proud of me because I declined to do anything for the Daily Mail. And then the piece from the Times was picked up by the Sun and the Daily Record and a few online blogs as well. And, well, I got misquoted continually, caused a bit of a storm with some of the football managers I had a relationship with in Scotland and so on. It's a pretty big nightmare. But what that allowed me to do was recognise how stories end up in the press and how they change over time. So by the time it gets to the final newspaper, they bear little resemblance to how the story first started, i.e. trying to do something positive and it ended up really negative. So the lesson that taught me was A, to be really cautious when working with the mainstream Scottish media anyway when talking about football. And it also taught me why in Scotland there's a little bit of a closed shop in Scottish football, and maybe it partially explains what's recognised to be an anti-intellectual culture in there, in which they distrust experts. And that was a really valuable lesson for me. It allowed me to understand the football environment a lot more and what coaches and managers in the game face. Anyway, I digress. One positive thing was that Routledge, the big international publisher, sent me this book by Vidar Halldórsson, Sport in Iceland, How Small Nations Achieve International Success. Now, I'm not on commission from Vidar, but if there's one book across the course that you buy, and you're interested in social cultural nature of sport and performance enhancement and all these sorts of things, I suggest that you buy this book. Now, it's not cheap. It's about £35 on Kindle on Amazon, and crazily expensive in hardback. But why did I like it? Well, it captured for me what an optimal sporting environment is. It was a socio-cultural hodgepodge of a perfect environment. So all these different factors came together, from education, schooling, relationships between national and regional government, having the right resources in place, having really tight communities, things like that. And most of the coaches, like you guys, are either engaged in or have an MSc in a sport-related topic. So even at grassroots level for the 8 or 10-year-olds, all the coaches tend to be quite highly educated as well. So that's something that I've picked up from what goes on in Iceland. Anyway, we're talking about performance analysis. And let me see. So, yeah, we're talking about performance analysis, and I picked up data here from the book. So it was in number form, so I just graphed it out to make it pretty for you guys. Now I hope I've got it accurate because I've left the book at home and I did the graph about 6 months ago. But from memory, the data comes from the European Handball Champs and represents notational analysis of behaviours rather than physical stuff observed of players in the team during the championship. Now, compared to their opponents, the data presented here is really enlightening and pretty objective too. So let's have a look at it. Well, if we see that Iceland is the Icelandic team, the observed behaviour, so we've got someone doing notational analysis or watching video, and they've come up with themes or categories for particular behaviours, ranging from player celebrates, team celebrates, through to playing hard. So they had developed a notational analysis system to record specific behaviours within the Icelandic team and their opponents throughout the championship. Now, put it in context, handball in Europe, quite a big sport. I know in the UK it's not so popular, and many of us won't be overly familiar with it, but it's still a relatively big sport on the continent. Now, Iceland have got circa a population of 424,000, so a big town's worth of people, mainly based in Reykjavik. but they're able to perform at a really high level in a number of sports. So I would have to look at the classifications now, but they tend to be doing better than Scotland at soccer. So they're quite well ranked in Europe in soccer. They're highly ranked in netball, in basketball. So that's their main sports. And they're doing particularly well. And one of the observations was the team dynamic. There seemed to be something additional in the behaviours of the team that brought them together as a cohesive unit in which they supported each other. So, with a population of 420,000, it's unlikely that, or it's impossible to have a really big pot of players to select a team from. It's a really small pot in which most people know each other quite well. They might be cousins and stuff, and everyone knows everyone in Iceland. And what that enables them to do is create a wonderful team dynamic. Now, what we see from this objective data in the slide, in terms of team support, so how they supported each other in a game, the observed behaviours were almost double that of their opposing teams. They tended to celebrate their successes more than each other. Individual celebrations too. They showed more emotion. They communicated well together and played hard. So what that's telling us is that whilst they may not individually be world-class players, when they come together and capture that unity, the social cultural factors that are really specific to a very small nation and how they support each other, that was transferred onto the playing field and was actually resulting in very high performances. So the fact that Iceland won a bronze medal at the European Championships, got to the semi-finals, was attributed to the behaviours we see on this slide. So what I'm trying to get across here is an alternative way of using performance analysis, and that sometimes we focus on the physical attributes. The evidence would tend to suggest that the talent pool isn't particularly large in Iceland, but what they make up for it with team dynamic enables them to play at a much higher level than other teams relative to their talent pools. So I've just put this lecture in to present a slightly different context of how performance analysis is used. I hope it's been useful for you, and I will speak to you shortly.